Hey guys, how's it going? OSCO here, back with another video. Today I'm going to be showing you how to mix down any track, just like my sort of guide to getting into mixing down a track and, you know, where to start with your mixes. So let's just jump right in. So you can see from this project here that, wait, this is my track, Signy, that came out a couple weeks ago, maybe about a week ago now, and it's a free download. It's out on my Soundcloud, so go check it out. But this is probably one of the more denser tracks that I've probably ever made. Uh, you know, nearly reaching 140 channels in terms of all the audio that's going on in here. So it's really dense, and basically, um, with a more dense project like this, you're gonna have to break down the workload into a few different areas. So even if your tracks aren't as dense as this, you can still apply the same technique. It's just that you want to be grouping in a smart way. So if you've seen my template video, basically it just breaks down how I've got all of these different groups for specific instrument types and how all of them are routed to certain buses to make the mixing process a little bit easier. So go watch that video, then come back and or watch this video and then go back and watch that one to fill in a bit of context. But basically, what I've got is all the drums routed into each individual bit. So I've got kicks and snares into one bus, my top drums in another bus, which is basically like my percussions and things like that. Then I've got cymbals, so anything that's like hat related, um, things like that. That's all in the cymbals section. So anything that's super bright. Percussion is anything that's like between 500 hertz and up. And I've got those all on a low pass filter basically in my chain section. As you can see down here, I've just got this EQ. So everything is sort of sitting in this band, I believe. Let's go into the top drums. Sorry, I'm wrong. All my drums are going straight to the premaster, and the premaster does have a high pass and low pass on it, but it's just sort of cleaning up muddy frequencies or super highs. So basically, have all of your cymbals and stuff running into one bus so that you can process them all and gel them together. Because if you pull different sounds from different sample packs and you're combining a lot of different elements and you're trying to get them to sit well together, if you want them to have a level of like coherence and sort of this sort of togetherness and they sound like they should be together, it's difficult to put into words, but just to gel it all together. Normally when people use the word gel, it means like to make them all sound like they're familiar with each other, they all have like a similar sonic character, is by grouping them all together, like, and on the individual tracks maybe processing them in their own way. So like, cleaning out any frequencies that you need to or boost any frequencies that you want to accentuate. But then as a whole, you want to be processing them all together in a similar way. So if I open up my rack here, you can see what's going on. I'm just there's no saturation going on in here, but I've just got some basic some vocoder stuff going on here. So by brightening this up, I'm basically putting this into a vocoder, which is just adding some high noise, and just adding a similar layer of like noise over the entire cymbal, like all the cymbals that are in this track. So there's a common sound between all of these sounds that are going on. And then those are just going through some basic, well, these aren't really doing anything. EQ, so it's all got a similar sort of sound going through it. So if I go to it's all being soft clipped by the same compressor. That's not doing anything. It's all got the same mid side going on, and I don't know why that's running through that limiter because I hate that limiter. Pro element. just to catch the peaks, I think. Yeah, so it's really not doing that. That's without the bus. So with this added on, it does like it's sounding cleaner without it, but all the sounds sort of poke out and they don't sort of squeeze together nicely. And now with this rack on, it adds a little bit of dirt, and it's more of a flavor thing that I've decided to add. And then they're also all being run through the same reverb coming out on this one here, which is just a Pro R with a high pass on it. So having similar reverbs on all your sounds makes them sound like they've been put in the same space. That's another tip for you guys, especially with drums and anything that's all in the same group. You shouldn't be applying different reverbs with different times to them. Like, you can probably get away with that with certain vocals. So like if you've got a main vocal or a backing vocal, if you're working with bands and stuff. But in terms of this sort of music, you should be having like a drum reverb or like a short reverb and a long reverb, and then you're playing about with those. So like effects will have a long reverb and then the hats will have a shorter reverb and things like that. Having things all sit in the same space just makes your mix sound tighter. It stops it from sounding washy, and it's just a useful thing to have in your arsenal in terms of it's a useful thing to know to keep a mix sounding clean and not having it sound washy. So coming down into like the instruments, I guess I can go into like drums as well, but drums is all pretty basic. It's just for EQing and stuff with drums and getting it to sound tight. It's if you want like an aggressive kick like in this track, basically what you want to do is take a basic sine wave and drive it like over the point of distorting. So like even though you're clipping in the red, you just want to take that sine wave and really push it and make sure it's on a tight envelope and give it like push it like 10 dB over 0, and you just get this like really thick sound, and then render that out and then run that through a glue compressor and soft clip it. So that's how you get those like super punchy short kicks. And then basically what I'm doing by boosting the fundamental and stuff, I'm basically extending the kick, like the length of it, and that gives it just a little extra presence in the low end when it's being played. And yeah, snares and stuff, it's all about layering sounds on top of each other that sound good together, and then just EQing out the points that you want and accentuating points that you want, maybe making cuts in areas that you don't like, which I don't think I've really done in any of this. So yeah, continuing on, percussion, it's all being run through the same reverb, I believe. No, it's not. So all the percussion's being run through its own processing in a percussion kit, which is all here. So I've got my drum racks here with sends in the drum racks. So all the percussion that's being played on this is basically going through the same processing. So it's all got the same reverb. It's all got the same the drum. So all the drum compression is all in parallel, and then it's got all the echoes and the sends are all the same. So it's about gelling things together, putting it into a bus, sending that off so that all the sounds in that bus sound coherent together. And then what you can do is play about with the level of each bus. So this track, this is all really dense, as you can see. Like there's loads and loads of tracks going on, but if you mix them all well within the groups, and then you balance. So if you get the balance of the groups right, then you can get the balance. So if you get the balance within the groups right, you can get the balance of all the groups together to sound right with each other. Because if you break each section down into small bits, it's a lot easier to manage than in terms of trying to mix every single track individually and be like, oh, does that fit well there? And you're listening to the entire mix, and then you're going, right, well, you know, I think this one little, you know, impact affect the intro. It's not sounding like it's really doing much. But if you get it all to sound right within context of just this group, and get the balance right there and the mix right there, make sure nothing's getting overlapped with any other sound, then that way you can push everything to the max essentially within that group, and then get it to sound like it sits well in terms of groups within groups. And to be honest, like, all the heavy lifting is done by these groups at the end, by having certain things run through to this main chain. So that's going down here. So anything that's being run into the main chain is like all the low ends being cut out of it. And my chain group is just, I normally have a sub chain in there as well, so I'm mixing the sub chain, but I think I deleted it in this track because I was doing a bunch of unique sound design things within this project. And then the pre-master's just doing some shaping. And yeah, basically the trick is just to make sure that everything within your groups is sounding nice and clean, and then when you're bringing in the groups into context with the bigger picture, then it's all about balancing the groups level rather than focusing on all the individual tracks. And that helps me achieve a much cleaner mix with loads more tracks, because you're breaking down the process into much smaller areas, and the mix doesn't become such an overburdening and overwhelming factor. And it doesn't put you off doing the track, because it, by breaking things down into smaller sections, makes everything a little bit easier in the long run. So I hope this video has been useful, guys. If you want any, you know, specific mixing tricks, you know what, no. So once I've got the levels balanced within these tracks, what I'll do is I'll make sure that each point has some sort of stereo separation. So basically in the intro, I want things to be quite captivating. So within the intro, I'll have things panned out, spread around nice and wide, so things are moving around your head, and it brings you into the track. Now you can see here that I've got placement markers. So I mix in a way that is very structured. So my intro will be wider, then where I create my interest before the drop, that will narrow up, and I'll bring in the frequency spectrum, so that over the course of this section, it'll get narrower and narrower by just using utility and bringing down the width. And then when it gets to this bit, it'll open up again. So like, by bringing you in and like giving you all these lush sounds that are all padding around your head and stuff in the intro, like that's like makes you go, oh, okay, what's going on here? And it, you know, creates intrigue. And then you get through into the bridge, and this will sort of, you know, by the time the person's listened to about 30 seconds in, they're committed to the track and they're going to be listening anyways. And then when things like kick off within the track, like you sort of like hit your crescendo, then you open things back up again, and it sort of creates a little bit more impact that way. And in this sort of music like that I'm writing, and I'm guessing you guys are writing something similar, like with bass music and stuff, is you want to take someone on a journey, and you need to mix in that way as well. You want to be mixing with the sole focus of keeping interest, and you know, mixing with the final product in mind at all times. You don't want to get lost within specific aspects, like I can't get that snare to sound right, or I can't get that hat to sound right, or there's this specific element that's really bugging me, and that's what slows you down in a mix. If it's bugging you and it's like causing problems, either A, replace the sound, or B, leave it. It's probably not that big of a deal. If it is sounding harsh, turn it down. If it's such a small element, it might not be too much of an issue. Just maybe replace it, and you should 9 times out of 10 you can find a better sample to replace it. Now, another mixing tip: be careful with your saturation levels on your basses as well. They can get quite a bit out of control and add a lot of harmonics that are quite difficult to manage. I guess any EQ tips you can try. I know you hear it time and time again, but cutting is much better than boosting. If you can remove a sound, like if you want to achieve a sound, try cutting to get to where you want to be before you start boosting. Unless if things are too quiet and you're boosting it with an EQ, just turn it up. The EQ8, if you're using that, is quite a harsh and clinical sounding EQ. And if you're using FabFilter's Pro Q, that's also quite a clinical sounding EQ. It's not very exciting. It doesn't boost things in a nice way. But it's great for cutting. It's a really surgical EQ, and it's really useful in that sense. And yeah, if you want to add, you can see here, like I'm boosting very slightly, like, I'm not really boosting a lot, but I'm cutting massively. And this is in one of the bass patches in the second drop, and I know in this one I'm boosting quite a bit, but there's cuts. Like, you got to do it all to ear and see what sounds right. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, if it sounds good, it usually is good. If you've got a trained ear and you know what to listen to or what to listen for, and if boosting it doesn't sound bad, you can get away with it. There are exceptions to the rules, and like once you understand how things work, then you can sort of break the rules. But 9 times out of 10, I'm cutting. Like, this is a ridiculous boost, but I probably should have just turned it up in this case and just put a high shelf on it. But those aren't the sort of EQ curves you want to see, really. But this is another trick as well that I use a lot: banding. So hard. Maybe I could probably get away with like less harsh curves, like something like that would probably be better. But just taking frequencies and like putting high and low shelf filters on them, and just getting it to the point where the sound is still identifiable within the mix, but you're just removing all the excess sound that's in there, because you don't need to hear a piano in a mix. You don't need to hear the super highs and super lows if you're playing around middle C. So, but there will be harmonics on either end, from where the sound of like the pedals being pushed, or where the notes being pressed and the hammers hitting the string. These are all extra sounds that are unnecessary, and all you want to hear is the note and the fundamentals. So just banding out around your melody, or banding out around a certain section of your bass, just helps clean up the mix a lot better. If you can start using the technique of banding, you can start cramming more things in the mix, if that's what you want. Or you can just create a lot more space for other things. Like, I use it on my reverbs a lot. So like on this room EQ, like normally I'd have something like that. So just stuff in the mid range is being left in there. Or on the bass reverb, like recently I've been like keeping it real narrow like that, so only basses are being reverberated in this, and it creates a real dark sort of feel to a reverb, and it also allows me to put like drum reverbs up in this upper end of the frequency spectrum, and then have this bass reverb down here, and it keeps them separate, and allows it just to be either louder in the mix, so it's a bit more present, or just it just creates it stops this this wash of sound from colliding with one another, and by EQing your sends, just create a cleaner mix in general. Go try it out. Go try out all this stuff and let me know what you think. I could, maybe some of the tips I'm giving you might not work, or doesn't create that big of a difference, but these are the things that I've been using recently, and it's been really helping me achieve a cleaner mix, because I used to struggle with having clean mixes. and I think now I'm sort of starting to get the grasp of it. Another thing as well, if you can find it anywhere, is like, or you got some money lying around, I really recommend where is it? Yeah, the SonarWorks plugin. So basically, um, it has a bunch of headphones which are, basically calibrated for this. So it's got a bunch of headphones that they've measured the frequency response of, and there's hundreds in here. So likely they've got your headphones if you've got any of these. And basically what it does, it'll even out the frequency spectrum. Now, on 100% where it's like rule of flat, I think it sounds really weird and it just doesn't sound right, in my opinion. And I just use it on like 75% because it does something strange with the low end. But it's also got like a linear phase mode. So like I always run it in that. It just like aligns everything and like adds a delay and just makes sure that everything's hitting at the same time. And basically it's just mapped out this EQ curve. So if I put this on 0, that's my EQ within these headphones. So it's, there's like a 7 dB bump in the high end, and like I always complain on stream that I don't trust these headphones, and I really don't. But with this plugin, it basically just takes it just applies like a reverse EQ on these headphones and just really evens them out. And when it's 100%, it does sound unnatural and strange. But if I dial in a bit of the sound that I'm familiar with these, it just helps me. That's within plus or minus 3 dB across the entire frequency spectrum, and to get that sort of response out of some monitors would require tens of thousands of pounds of room treatment, and probably like 8 grand's worth of monitoring. And with this plugin, I can achieve that level of detail and accuracy just by slapping that on the master. And with my £300-400 headphones, I've just I've got a really really good sense of what's going on in my mix. Now, another thing that people will always say, a lot of people that I've come across will say, you don't need a good sound card, or you don't need a good set of headphones, or like you can get away with a set of headphones and a laptop, and you can do anything. And yeah, you can to an extent, but I'm a big proponent of investing in yourself and getting some higher quality converters, like the Focusrite DACs, the little interfaces. They're great, for an entry level producer. Like you can get a good representation of what's going on. But if you're plugging your headphones either straight into your computer or into your laptop, like those converters that they've got in those laptops, like Apple and what other PC manufacturer, they will pay pennies for these little chips that are really noisy. They don't retrieve a lot of detail. Like they really do just sound bad. Like it's, if you compare listening to straight out the headphone port or into a Scarlett, that you do notice a bit of difference. There's a bit more weight in the low end. Everything's a bit more rounded. The highs sound a little bit clearer. It's not so tinny and hissy, and the noise floor is lower. So when you're cranking it, it doesn't sound so jarring. Like it's nice volume, and you can usually get headphones to sound like better, louder. And it's just it's these things that you need to think about in terms of like getting cheaper headphones as well. Like if you buy a set of £40 headphones, it's like, are they really giving you the amount of detail that you think you need? If you want an expensive sound, you kind of have to invest in time learning how to achieve an expensive sound, and being able to hear the subtle differences between certain types of distortion or EQs. Like if you can't hear half a dB of gain change in an EQ, or if you can't hear a dB difference when you're applying saturation, like maybe you can only hear like 2 or 3 dB. Either A, you need to train your ear better, and you need to mix down more tracks and like sort of achieve a level of understanding with this sort of thing, or you need maybe it would be time to invest. Like if you've been doing it for a few years, maybe you should invest in some better headphones or some better better quality DACs. Like I've got the 18i20 by Focusrite down here, and even to my ear, like I can achieve a great amount of detail, like a greater amount of detail with it than most things, but I still feel like I'm lacking in terms of the quality of conversion that's coming out of this thing. And yeah, having a good converter and a good set of headphones does help massively. Like I've heard the high end stuff, and I've heard firsthand like it does make a massive difference. And yeah, in terms of like all the basic mixing approaches, I think that's it. Get your volume, get your levels right, get a good playback system. Use the stereo field in the intros, and play about with the width of your track as it progresses through, and mix with the sole intention of keeping the listener's interest. Because when you start mixing like that, and you keep things moving and a track breathing along the course of however long your track is, just makes it sound more professional. And if you treat mixing like a very basic, if you don't mix, if your mix isn't as complex as your production, then your track won't sound as professional. Like you can have a good idea and it's still a good track for sure. Like I'm the prime example of that. Like Dizzy wasn't a super well mixed track. It's pretty, but the idea itself was pretty good. But with a solid mix, I think that track could have been so much more. And yeah, maybe it's something I need to revisit. But I hope this video has been useful and you've learned a few things. I've rambled on quite a bit, but yeah. If there's anything that I've missed, or like anything that you want covered in more detail, like specific mixing techniques or anything in particular, if you want a good resource for learning specific mixing techniques, check out Dave Pensado on YouTube. He's got a big podcast, but he's got this thing called Into the Lair, and he has like loads of really, really useful specific mixing techniques, especially for like low end and bass and mixing mid-range and cymbals and drums. And it's just, he's got like really cool techniques that most people just don't really know about. And he's like mixed anyone who's anyone, like major pop wise. Like he's mixed Beyonce, Justin Bieber, like all these like massive mainstream artists, and he's just got a YouTube channel giving out all these crazy mix techniques. So go check him out if you haven't heard of him already. He's really good. And any other resources just based on music in general. You don't need to be just listening to people like me that are talking specifically about 140 and dubstep or like halftime and things like that. You should really, in terms of like learning about sound design or like mixing and mastering, you should really look out and broaden your horizons on where you're getting your information from, because there is a lot of good stuff out there on YouTube. But just because it might not be specifically to your genre doesn't mean that things from other genres can't relate. So yeah, go check out some of the channels. And yeah, if you want to see more things behind my music, then check out my Patreon, and all my socials will be in the links in the description below. I've just released a new EP. If you haven't seen that on my channel already, go check that out. It's out on Bandcamp now. And yeah, I think that's it, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.